Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As Shannon mentioned just a minute ago, we're going to be talking about our new study from the REL Northeast Islands on earning college credit in high school, new evidence about a promising practice. So before we get started, we'll have you do a quick poll just to see who you all are. I know we have many participants today, and it'd be interesting to hear about what your experience, if any, with dual enrollment. Have you participated in it as a student, teacher, program administrator, or not at all? So take a moment to fill that out. Keep in mind that you can answer with a broad definition of dual enrollment. Okay, we've got lots of answers already. If you wouldn't mind going to the results, please. Thank you. It looks like we have a close match there between program administrators or people who don't have any experience, and some teachers and some students. That's great. Really great to hear that we have some students on. Okay, thank you. Okay, so our agenda today is to do a quick introduction and overview. I will then introduce the study and provide a little bit of background about the study. You'll hear from my colleague who will discuss the findings from our study. And then we'll hear some policy perspective from the Rhode Island Department of Education. We'll have a practitioner panel between two folks who will discuss some of the implications of our study. And we'll close by having time for questions and answers. And then we will wrap up. We are putting materials into the chat. So make sure that you check the chat. We have just added the link to our study for which this webinar is based. Thank you. Okay. So we have a couple of goals for the webinar today. We want you to learn about the relationship between students' participation in accelerated college credit programs and student academic outcomes. We also want you to learn about some guidance for district schools, parents, and students on these programs, and learn about what the experience of implementing these programs is from the perspective of school and state administrators. So the presenters today include myself. I'm Dr. Jessica Bailey. I'm a research scientist for the REL Northeast Islands. My colleague Shin is putting all of our bios in the chat. My colleague is Dr. Catherine Shields. She was the study's lead author. She is also a research scientist representing the REL Northeast Islands. We have two other members of our team, Shin Zhang and Makoto Haneda, who are both on the webinar today, who contributed to the study. Then we're joined by Spencer Sherman. He's the Chief of Innovation at the Rhode Island Department of Education. Then we have a panel. Go to the next slide. We have Gina Silva. She's Head of Counseling for Providence Public Schools. So we'll hear her perspective about these programs and how to implement them. And then Spencer Sherman, again, the Chief of Innovation for RIDE, is going to participate in our panel to give us a state policy perspective. And just a little bit of background about who we are. REL Northeast Islands is one of 10 federally funded regional educational laboratories. We're funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and we work in partnership with educators and policymakers to develop and use research that improves academic outcomes for students. We do this by conducting research studies like the one that you're going to hear about today, by disseminating research findings, such as the event today. We strategically engage partners to use the findings, and then we also design and deliver technical assistance focused on the use of data and research. The work that we did for this study that we're going to talk about today was done as part of a partnership with multiple groups. We worked, as the second bullet describes, we worked in partnership with the Rhode Island Department of Education, or RIDE, the Rhode Island Office of the Post-Secondary Commissioner, and the Rhode Island School Superintendents Association. For this partnership, we did many things besides just this study, but all of them involved using data from the state's longitudinal data system to help support decisions regarding college and career readiness initiatives. And we had a particular focus on equity for all of our work. So now I will give a little bit of background about the study. So several years ago, back in 2013, the Rhode Island General Assembly passed legislation that called for the adoption of a statewide policy for dual enrollment that allowed students to take college courses to earn credit at both their high school and a post-secondary institution. So that then set the stage for the Rhode Island Board of Education to create and adopt regulations that provided all qualified high school students access to college-level coursework while still in high school. So this has been happening in the state since 2015. And there's actually several mechanisms and ways in which students can get access to advanced coursework. So their primary are through the All Course Network and through the Prepare RI Dual Enrollment Fund. And Spencer Sherman will speak a little bit more about the Prepare RI Dual Enrollment Fund later. So through the All Course Network, students can access dual enrollment. They can take advanced placement as well as a few other options. And then through the Prepare RI Dual Enrollment Fund, which is the state's fund to support these types of programs, the state's 3 public institutions, CCRI, which is the Community College of Rhode Island, RIC, the Rhode Island College, and URI, University of Rhode Island, offer either dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment. So those are the ways in which students can access these types of programs while they are in high school. So while we were in our partnership with the Rhode Island partners that I mentioned earlier, the State Superintendents Association, RIDE, and the Office of Higher Education, the Post-Secondary Commissioner's Office, the partnership members expressed an interest in having more evidence to understand accelerated college credit programs in Rhode Island, given their high interest across the state and their actual really fast growth that they were seeing. So they wanted some evidence to understand not only the participation and numbers and what types of students were participating, but also the impact on students' outcomes in Rhode Island. So using the state's data from their statewide longitudinal data system, we were able to use a sample of over 8,000 students who were first-time ninth graders in Rhode Island public schools starting the year 2013-14. We followed them through. So just a little bit more about the definitions of accelerated college credit programs. I want to go to the next slide. You might be familiar with advanced placement, concurrent enrollment, and dual enrollment. We refer to these all generally as accelerated college credit programs. It means any of these 3 programs. So advanced placement, as you may know, is just a high school course that is based on a national curriculum provided by the College Board, and it has a standardized subject area assessment. So in short, it's a college level course that's taught at the high school based on national curriculum and has an exam. Concurrent enrollment, on the other hand, is a program that allows high school students to take approved college level courses. The unique piece is that they are taught by their instructors, their high school teachers at the high schools, at the student's high school. Dual enrollment, on the other hand, refers to students who attend college courses taught by college faculty, either at a public or private college campus. So they generally have to go there unless it's a virtual option. And we've put some of those definitions into the chat. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Catherine Shields. She is going to provide an overview of the findings of our study, the effects of accelerated college credit programs on educational attainment in Rhode Island. Catherine?
Thank you, Jess. So I'm going to talk now about how we conducted the study and what we found. And if we can go to the next slide. As Jess explained, the state was really interested in understanding more about the results of their investment in accelerated college programs. So with our Rhode Island partners, we decided to look at the following questions together. First, we asked, what are the participation rates in these programs, and how do student and school characteristics compare across the 3 programs, dual, concurrent, and advanced placement? And secondly, we asked, what is the effect of participation in any of these programs on student outcomes, and specifically looking at high school graduation, college enrollment, and college readiness? And because the state was especially concerned about making sure that these programs are equitable, we also looked at whether the effects differ between students whose families have experienced economic disadvantage and other students. And we defined economic disadvantage as being eligible for the federal free or reduced price lunch program. So as we can see on the chart on the next slide, we looked at this cohort of ninth graders statewide who started high school in fall 2013. And in this group, we found that 41% of students participated in one or more of the accelerated college credit programs by the time they graduated high school. So that is about 2/5 of students enrolled in at least one dual or concurrent course or took at least one AP test. Dual enrollment, which, as Jess mentioned, takes place on the college campus, was the least common form of participation, and that only reached 4% of students. Whereas concurrent enrollment and advanced placement, where the student is taking courses at their high school, was more common, with a little more than 1/4 of students participating in each of those forms of the program. We also saw that about 15% of students participated in more than one of the three programs. Next. So as you can see on this slide, overall, some groups of students were underrepresented in these accelerated credit programs. Students who were members of racial ethnic minority populations, students who were eligible for the federal free and reduced price lunch program, as well as young men were not represented proportionately within these programs. But it's interesting, if you look at the red bars, you can see that dual enrollment was reaching a different group of students. So although it was a much smaller number of students overall participating, we found that dual enrollment was generally concentrated more in a few urban high schools that served communities with higher proportions of Black and Hispanic or Latinx students and families experiencing economic disadvantage. Next. So we can see from the descriptive statistics that the students who participate in these programs are different from those who do not in terms of their demographic profiles. And we also found, not surprisingly, that academically proficient students were more likely to participate. So to be able to assess the effects of the program fairly, it was important to compare accelerated credit students to other similar students. To do that, we created a matched group of students who were statistically similar in terms of their academic proficiency in 8th grade, as well as their demographic characteristics and also the characteristics of their schools, such as how close is the school to a college campus. And this wasn't a randomized experiment, so students chose to enroll in these courses or not. So we used this matching approach to get closer to having a level starting point and to see where students who started at a similar place would end up after taking these courses or not taking these courses. Next. We found that accelerated college credit students are predicted to be more likely to graduate high school, to enroll in college, and to be college ready. So as you'll see on the graph on the next slide, this graph on the next slide is showing how likely it is that each group would graduate high school. And this is based on the analysis of that matched set of students. So this graph is not showing their actual graduation rate. This is a predicted rate based on the analysis. And as you can see here, if you look at the left-hand bars, accelerated college credit participants were predicted to graduate high school at a rate of 96%. So that's the blue bar on the left, while the non-participating students were predicted to graduate at a rate of 75%, which is the red bar. We also looked at whether the effects were different depending on the student's household economic status. So if you look at the bars to the right, we found that the effects were statistically almost the same in these two groups. So it was notable that the effects of these programs appeared to apply more or less equally to students who were experiencing economic barriers, as well as to more advantaged students who were not. Next. And we saw a similar pattern for college enrollment. So students in accelerated college credit programs were predicted to enroll in college at a rate of 84% on the blue bar, while non-participating students were predicted to enroll in college at a rate of 54%, which you can see on the red bar. And again, we did not find differences in this effect related to student economic disadvantage. Next. To assess college readiness, so we looked at whether a student enrolled in a developmental course at a Rhode Island public college. These are sometimes called remedial courses, and they're courses that students sometimes have to take when they get to college if they're not ready for college level work. And this information was only available from Rhode Island's public colleges, so we had to use a little bit of a different approach to this analysis. But overall, we found that program participants had a lower predicted enrollment rate in a developmental education course in a Rhode Island public college compared to the non-participants. And that's looking at those two bright blue bars that you can see there. Now, we know that overall, these accelerated college credit program students were more likely to go to college in the first place, but we're also seeing here that if once they go to college, that they're more likely to be ready for those courses. Now, again, because we only have this information from the state's public colleges, we can really only draw this conclusion about those students, about Rhode Island public college students. But it would be an interesting area to do more work to see if this also was true for private and for out-of-state colleges. Next. So finally, we explored whether there might be differences among these three programs. So up to now, I've been talking about accelerated college credit as having taken any one of the three: dual, concurrent, or advanced placement. And so now if we looked at each program separately, we used a little bit of a different technique to analyze this, but we found that there was still a positive relationship with participating in the program and graduating high school, as well as with enrolling in college, which is what's shown on this slide. So although this analysis did not use as rigorous an approach, because the comparison group wasn't matched quite as effectively to really get them to the same starting point, as we showed in the other analyses, it is really promising for further research to see whether that holds true, that all three programs are having this positive relationship to outcomes. So finally, some caveats to keep in mind on the next slide. Although we used a match group based on student and school characteristics that we could access, we know there are other factors that play into a student's educational progress that we didn't have information about. For example, a student who is highly motivated or who has a very school-savvy parent might be more likely to take one of these classes and also more likely to go to college, for example. So that would complicate our ability to say that it was the program that made the difference for that student. So these other factors that we couldn't see may be inflating the size of the predicted probabilities that we showed in the slides. If you look at other studies that did have the ability to randomly assign students in an experiment to take the courses or not, many of them have also found positive effects on student educational outcomes, but the size of the effects was somewhat smaller. So that's just a caveat to keep in mind. So I'm now going to turn it over to Spencer Sherman, the Chief of Innovation at the Rhode Island Department of Education, and he is going to talk about these results from his perspective at a state education agency.
Hey everyone, and thanks, Catherine, for the background. This is a study that I've been very, very excited about since we started it, and I want to talk a little bit about what the implications are for us at the state level, what we do with this information. I think research is always interesting, but what we're really trying to do is have research inform policy. And I'm hoping that we can use the research that the REL put together, that Catherine just shared, showing really strong outcomes for kids, how we can use that to influence our policymaking. Next. So there's a few big questions that this research helps us answer. I think the overall theme here is, from the policy perspective, there's always going to be trade-offs, I think particularly with funding. And so one question we get all the time from the General Assembly or the state legislature who gives us the money for these programs is the return on the investment. They always ask, all right, I can give $1 million here, $1 million there. What's going to lead to the biggest outcome for kids? And I think what this research study lets us do is actually be able to quantify that and give a much more direct impact on kids for this funding. So one thing we're trying to do in partnership with the Office of the Post-Secondary Commissioner, which, as Jess said, is our overarching higher education agency, is provide sustainable long-term funding for these programs because they very clearly make a difference for kids. This gives us the tools to really clearly advocate for that. Another thing it does is to talk about different policy avenues here. So there's dual enrollment, which is, as Jessica said before, is courses that are given on the college campus. That's a very different policy mechanism for us at the state level versus having it done inside the high schools, like happens in concurrent enrollment, which is also very different than AP. And Gina Silva from Providence will talk a little bit about how that's managed at the school level. So all those are very different ways, different approaches to make sure that kids are getting college level coursework. And so we want to better understand what the impact was for all these different programs. The other thing here that's on the slide that I think is extremely important is this helped us really go beyond anecdote and understand what are the implications of this work? I think we've always understood that there's very different patterns of dual and concurrent enrollment, and that having this opportunity open to all kids doesn't necessarily mean all kids take advantage of it. This helped us get below the surface and better able to answer those questions. Let's go to the next slide. So I think with that evidence in our back pocket, we can then make a better case going forward. And here's some of the policies that we're currently doing to support accelerated college credit opportunities, but we'll hopefully use this research to figure out which levers to pull more going forward. One thing we do in the state is something we call the all-course network. I think this is a pretty innovative policy that we have here in Rhode Island, which is effectively a statewide course catalog. So kids across the state can take free classes, anything from a community college to a nonprofit to another high school. All of those courses are available on this platform. And we actually now have a centralized site to sign up for it called Enroll RI. So a lot of the opportunities that we just talked about are available on this platform. So that gives us the question of how do we encourage more kids to sign up on that site. We've also spent a lot of time trying to increase AP course taking. And we've seen a big bump from 18% increase since 2010. We've really seen a huge jump in our computer science course taking. We have an initiative called Computer Science for Rhode Island, or CS4RI, that's invested very heavily in teacher training and expansion of pipelines in computer science. And we've seen a 17-fold increase, not 17%, but 17-fold increase in AP college credit classes in computer science because of that. We're also trying to incentivize schools and therefore students to take more of these college credit classes. So part of our school report cards that we give to schools, there's something called Diploma Plus, which measures not just they have a diploma, but you have diploma plus college credit. And have that little indicator on our report cards for schools, we're hoping will lead to, and so far anecdotally we've seen, has lead to an increase in the number of students in schools offering dual, concurrent, or AP classes. And finally, we're trying to align our high school diplomas to our colleges. So one thing that happened when we last changed our graduation requirements, created something called pathway endorsements, which is a little stamp on your diploma, almost like a major. For a college student, we have that for high school students. And we're aligning those to the college majors, something called guided pathways at local colleges. So if you're a student who wants to be a biology major, this helps you understand what are the courses I can take in high school that'll connect directly to college classes, so I can get a head start on my college degree. So those are some of the policy questions we have that this research helps inform, but I'll turn it back to Jessica to talk through more questions from the panel.
Great. Thank you, Spencer. Such great implications and such a great use of the work that we did together. I'm seeing some questions come in the chat. That's wonderful. Thank you. Please keep them coming. We're going to answer them after we do this practitioner panel. So for the panel right now, it's myself, Spencer, and Gina. Gina Silva, as I mentioned earlier, is the head of counseling for Providence Public Schools. So hopefully you can see all of us here. So I have a few questions, and I'm going to start with Gina. I was wondering if you could just let the audience know what your role is in helping to implement accelerated college credit programs.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gina Silva. I'm the Director of School Counseling K-12 for the Providence Schools. And what I do as Director of Counseling, I've worked with counselors, administrators, central office staff to review the data that we have from the PSAT and MSQT to identify students that have the potential to be successful in AP courses. And I've also worked on the policy, revising the AP policy, and the developing a dual and concurrent enrollment policy for the district. So some of the things within that policy that have been helpful, we pay for all AP exams. All of the courses are weighted now, so that reflected on their high school transcript, as well as earning high school college credit.
That's great, Gina. Thank you. And Spencer, I know you gave us a really great overview of what the state is doing with the work, but can you just talk about what your role has been in helping implement these programs from the state perspective?
Sure. So in my position, I oversee the Office of College and Career Readiness, which directly manages all these programs and all of our sort of early college programs, as well as the Office of Data, Technology, and Research. And so this project actually happens to be a nice blend of the two, of here's some research informing our college and career readiness work here. I think what we do at a state level to encourage these programs, one of the biggest things is we work in partnership with the post-secondary partners to make all of these courses free for all kids. I think that's something that the former governor created, which has been a tremendously popular program. So if you are a student, and I saw actually this question pop up, if you're any high school student, you can take college credit courses at our local colleges for free. There's no requirements before you take those classes. I think that's a really exciting program, but not every kid takes advantage of it. So I think one of the implications here is this does really seem to work for all kids. So how do we make sure that more kids can take advantage of those opportunities?
Great. Thank you, Spencer. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions. One of which, Gina, I'll start with you, is what are some of the successes or positive outcomes that you've seen for students based on their experience in these programs?
Sure. So we've seen an increase in student participation in all of the programs since we began in 2014. We've also seen that students have built their confidence in understanding that they can be successful and they're up for this challenge. They definitely are leaving more prepared and college and career ready. Another thing I would say is they understand that they have, the persistence and they have to persevere to get through these courses, and they work with the staff to do that. They're attaining college credit as they leave high school, so they're already going in with a little bit of ahead in the game. Just that overall experience to the rigorous courses is definitely beneficial.
That's really great to hear. Thank you for that. Spencer, what about from your perspective? What are some of the positive outcomes that you've seen?
I think the biggest ones are the stuff that came out of this study. So showing that this has, a huge goal we have is increasing graduation rates. We've also invested very heavily, sort of hoped that these programs had a big impact on that. And it's just really nice and vindicating to see that these do seem to have, a fairly rigorous study design, seem to be having the effects that we're hoping to have. And so as we're doing our next 5-year plan, which we've actually released last year through 2025, one of our big goals is graduation rates. And so we are trying to figure out internally as an agency, where do we have a few big bets to boost those outcomes? What are things we should invest our time, money, resources, and manpower into? And I think one implication of this study is these programs are one of those things that are really worth investing our time in. I think there's a huge tendency from a state perspective because there's so many things going on to be spread very thin. And I think it's really important to know what are the big bets that you should invest in. And I think this is clearly one of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for the kind words about the usefulness of our study. So there are a lot of successes that you both mentioned. And I'm wondering, though, what are some of the challenges or barriers that you see in getting more students to participate in these helpful programs? And Gina, I'll start with you.
Sure. In regards to the dual enrollment, the college is on a college campus. Some of the challenges have been transportation or conflicts with work or extracurricular activities. I would say for concurrent enrollment, college courses taught in our high schools. One of the challenging pieces is teacher certification and what degrees they have in order to teach these courses. And for AP, I would say the professional development, we need to increase the professional development for teachers and maybe have a district-wide or even statewide program to support that.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given the national teacher shortage and just the lack of finding qualified individuals. Spencer, any barriers that you've noticed or challenges regarding these programs?
Yeah, I think from some of the slides that Catherine shared earlier, you see that the students who are taking advantage of these classes, it's not a representative sample of our students statewide, right? They tend to be overall a little whiter, wealthier, and with higher previous test scores, which is, we want to have this be open to all kids. And so I think, educators, we always talk about the difference between equity and equality. So right now we have pure equality. Every kid has access to these courses. But that's very, very different from having actual equitable access, meaning that kids take this at rates equal to their proportion of the population. Because that means that to Gina's point, we need to make sure that we're providing more supports for kids who might not know about these programs or might have other obstacles that prevent them from accessing it. So, for example, transportation is something that comes up all the time. Just because you can sign up doesn't necessarily mean you can get to that campus. And so, if you have a car, that's much easier than if you don't. You have to take public transportation. So, what we're trying to figure out is, all right, the next level that I'm hoping to dive into is, now that we see these differential rates of who takes these programs, what are things that we can do to remove those obstacles for kids so that people who benefited from the most actually have whatever supports they need to be able to take advantage of it.
That's great. Thank you. And just to probe a little bit further, is there a specific example of something that you're planning to do from the state level, Spencer? I know transportation is one, but RIDE isn't necessarily in charge of transportation, like public transportation. Is there something specific that you've heard or are thinking about that you might want to do, such as, communicating the benefits to parents? And we created a video that we'll put into the chat soon, and even an infographic and things like that that could help get the word out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from a state level, how do we influence individual students' decisions for how to sign up? And so I think one thing we're trying, we can communicate directly to superintendents and the principals, but I think from Gina's perspective, school counselors are really, really impactful on kids. And I'm a former AP teacher, and I think as a direct teacher in a classroom, I could advocate for the importance of AP and could make decisions at the school about increasing those rates. So I think one thing we're trying to play around with is, what are the most interesting, most effective ways for us to actually impact student behavior so they can, parents can learn about this and sign up. And I think a lot of what we've learned so far from our initial work is it's not always sort of a top-down approach, but often once can we get information directly in the hands of parents and students, then they make great decisions. But once you sort of start that sort of viral tier of having kids talk to other kids, that's where this really takes off. It's less, someone in some office building sending out, a message. It's more, how do you get in the hands of actual kids to talk to each other about it?
Right. Gina, do you have any thoughts to add to that about what you're doing in Providence to help spread the word and get more students to access programs?
Yeah, so the counselors are having individual sessions with the students to talk about, what their interests are and the potential for taking any of these programs. We do have a partnership with one of our with Community College of Rhode Island, an Accelerate program, full-time dual enrollment program. We have, encouraged students to take during their senior year. So I would just say, it's just counselors getting out to the students to meet with them to talk about these different programs.
Yeah, that's great. And it just reminds me of the importance of sharing these types of findings with counselors. Getting our results into the hands of the counselors is really important. Okay, so lots of questions coming in the chat. That's great. We're going to get to those in a moment. Do either of you have any thoughts on how COVID might have affected participation in these programs or changed the experience for students? Our study was pre-school closures due to COVID. So Gina, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I know we saw a decrease in the number of students participating in the AP exams. And partly that was because it was virtual, the exams that students had to participate this year for the most part. And that was challenging, right? Taking the course virtually and the exam. And another challenging piece, I would say, is that we had the hybrid schedule. So those that were in person were not there every day. So that was difficult for students to get through regarding the AP and concurrent enrollment side. And dual enrollment was virtual too. So, right. That in itself for those students that were taking a full-time dual enrollment course or program for the first time, it was all virtual. So, some of those challenges.
Yeah. Spencer, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated outcome, I think, from COVID. So I think one thing overall we're seeing, and we're releasing our test scores next month, but I think something you've seen from the results nationally is just there was huge impacts on student learning from COVID for very obvious reasons. And so I think that's, if you're a student who ultimately is on the path to be taking some of these courses and now you don't quite have the math skills that you would have had without COVID, I think we're going to be seeing the long-term implications of COVID on student learning for a very long time. One thing that I think that might be positive is a lot of the courses that were previously only offered in person were available online. So I think we'll be releasing a report, I believe, in the next few weeks or a month on our what the numbers were for this past year on taking these courses. But I think anecdotally, something we've seen is kids were now able to take classes that they couldn't take the bus to get, but now they could just log into a Zoom browser and access. So I do think we will see some boost there. I think my concern would be about the equity implications. So people who, kids who have easy Wi-Fi at home might have differential access compared to kids who don't. So I think there's some benefits here, but I'm worried it might exacerbate some equity gaps that we already have in the state.
Right. And actually, you're speaking exactly to Isabella Jacoby's question that she just posted in the chat, which you probably didn't even notice, Spencer, but you were speaking to it. So thank you. Okay. Last question for both of you. We have a wide range of participants on the call today, and I'm wondering, what piece of advice do you have for them that they can then share with their partners, whether it's a policymaker or a stakeholder or their children or whomever it might be? What piece of advice would you want to leave them with? Gina, let's start with you.
Sure. I would just stress the importance of collaborating across the districts, I should say, not just Providence, but amongst all the districts, to provide that, like I've mentioned, the professional development training for teachers, even if there's some program for students to better be informed and prepared for the programs, and definitely continue to expand and continue the funding for these programs. We've definitely seen the benefits of it. Many of the students enjoy it and continue to take advantage of it. So I would say for policymakers to continue to support it. Thank you.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Spencer.
I think just regardless of where you sit, there's something you could do to increase these programs. So I think the easiest starting place is AP programs. Those can almost always be made just by a direct decision at the school. When I was a teacher, I just wanted to teach an AP class and talk to my principal and we set one up. So I think that's the easiest thing to set up. This giant fund that we have to make these courses free across the state obviously is a heavier lift. But I will say, to Gina's point, the collaboration, there's a lot of people advocating for this. And so particularly actually in the post-COVID landscape, a lot of our colleges are sort of hurting for enrollment. And so an opportunity to use some state funding to not just provide empty subsidies to these schools, but make sure that we're creating a pipeline of high school students to enroll in those colleges, I think is a win for both the students and also for the colleges. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to think about how you can advocate on a joint basis for these programs for kids.
That makes a lot of sense, Spencer. Thank you for that. Well, and thank you both for all of your thoughts there. That was really insightful and sparked a lot more questions coming in the chat. So why don't we go ahead and move over then into the Q&A portion of the meeting. And please keep your questions coming in the chat. We'll try to answer them in the order that they were received. And the questions could be for any of our panelists, Spencer, Gina, or also Catherine, to talk about the research findings. So I'm actually going to start with a question for Catherine. I just have to find where it went now. Let's see. So Catherine, can you talk a little bit about what our study found in terms of the data, in terms of race and ethnicity, or anything else from an equity perspective? We mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned that our stakeholders really did want to have a focus on equity. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we mainly focused on that economic disadvantage, that is, was the family eligible for free or reduced price lunch. But we did also look at race ethnicity. So we looked at if a student was was Asian, Black, Hispanic, or Latinx, or multiple races, and looking at that group of students and how they compared with students who were not part of a racial ethnic minority in the state. And we similarly found that essentially there was little difference in outcomes in terms of the effects of these programs between those two groups. So that was another encouraging sign, and one where we really like to do follow-up work to understand in more depth, but among each different ethnic group what those experiences might be. But it seemed like promising evidence that this was beneficial across the board. I think there's other areas to look at, like looking at multilingual learners and their experiences, for example, which we did not have time to do in this study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely promising. Thank you, Catherine. And on that note, there was a question that came in, which I think has been slightly addressed, but I'll open it up to folks if they want to add any more. The question was, given that both advantaged and disadvantaged students are predicted to benefit equally from participation in these accelerated college credit programs, what can be done to increase their participation, particularly among disadvantaged students? And Spencer, I don't know if you might want to speak to, it was on your slide about the implications, but how one of our findings was that we saw a difference in where these programs were being offered, particularly with concurrent, and what might be done there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing is what's the easiest, if we want to get kids college credit, there's each level is a little bit, increasingly difficult. So AP, I think, is relatively straightforward. And so we've worked with PBSD fairly directly to increase AP classes there. And in Rhode Island, and I think of us more as probably like a region, another, in a larger state, is a lot of our, students of color or our low-income students are all concentrated in a very small number of districts, so that we can work pretty directly with a small handful of districts to dramatically provide increased supports that should have large equity implications statewide. AP, like I said, is probably the easiest one to push on. I think the next thing sort of coming out of this study is concurrent enrollment. So all we need to do from our end is find those teachers in the schools and make sure that they are certified and registered with the local colleges so that they can teach those classes. And so that turns a high school, that allows them to teach a college class directly in their high school without having to worry about all those logistical obstacles about permission slips and transportation and things like that. And one of the things that came out of your study was just there's not a lot of concurrent enrollment happening in our urban schools. So that's something that we can push on, and we're interested in pushing on more this year, is increase the numbers of both AP and concurrent enrollment in urban schools.
Great. And as to Gina's earlier point, and her key takeaway is that it's not just finding these teachers to teach these concurrent enrollment courses. That is actually a big lift, and districts need to work together with the colleges to provide that training for the teachers. So anything else to add there from Catherine or Gina? Okay. So the next question was about whether students who are dually or currently enrolled in high school, are they able to take developmental courses, or do they have to meet the college ready standard and assessment in order to participate in the program? And Spencer, that might be something that you know the answer to.
Yeah, there's no barriers to entry. Any kid can take any class, pending if there's certain issues from, for example, there's some courses that are more advanced, like the senior level classes at a local college. Basically, the kids have access, the high school students have access to the course catalog. And so there's certain courses that are listed. It tends to be the introductory level courses, but you don't need to pass any tests before you take those classes.
Even if it was a quote unquote, like a remedial or developmental course, they could still take that.
Yeah, I think we generally don't see a ton of students taking those developmental classes because technically those are high school level classes. So you would just take those in your own high school. We tend to see more interest in sort of college level classes.
Great. Okay. So Gina, you've partially already discussed this next question, but what, if any, special credentials or training is required for teachers who instruct the current and concurrent enrollment courses? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So typically the teacher needs to have a master's degree in the content area in order to teach that course. So that, like I mentioned, is the challenging piece in some of our schools. Some principals have really worked with their teachers to tap into which certifications they have and what degrees and what courses they can work with and teach in our local colleges. So that has helped, but that has been somewhat limited in the majority of our schools because of the degree and certification area.
Right. And from my understanding, and Spencer, you just mentioned this, they do have to register in some way with the local college or university too. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay, there was another question that said, is the partner providing the college credits for the dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment programs the same? So I believe they're asking can some of the colleges offer both concurrent and dual enrollment? Spencer, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, we're a small state, so we only have 3 public colleges, and they all offer both.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so there was a question, Gina, when you were talking about your specific partnership in Providence that you have with one of the local colleges. Can you talk a little bit more about that? The question was, how many colleges do you partner with in Providence? I believe it's just one, but can you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we partner with the 3 local colleges, as Spencer mentioned, for dual and concurrent enrollment. But the full-time dual enrollment program last year was with 2 colleges, Community College of Rhode Island College for the full-time Accelerate program. And this year it's just the community college.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. Spencer, there is a question about whether the state covers the cost of textbooks and instructional materials for students. Can you speak to that one?
I'm going to get this right. I know this part of our regulations. So we passed a bunch of regulations that explain who covers what for different costs. And if I remember correctly, the school district covers the cost. Gina's nodding. Okay, so I'm getting it right. The school district covers the textbook costs, but the tuition costs are covered by the state.
Right. So it's essentially free to the student. There is no cost for them, but the funding is coming from a few different buckets.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now let's see. This next question, I'm not sure yet who wants to take it, but it says, do you have degree programs in place which allow students to earn their associate degree and high school diploma? And if yes, how many degree options are available to students?
I think the 2 main programs that we do, one is the Accelerate program that Gina mentioned, which is a program, Accelerate it's a Providence version of a program that exists in some form statewide with our community college, which allows students to enroll full-time in the community college for their senior year. So we have that program. Another program we have is P-TECH, which is a national model that's sort of a 6-year pathway to both a associate's degree and a high school degree. We have those, I believe Providence has some as well. We have a handful of those across the state. I think we're still early enough. I think we're still at year 4 or 5 from the programs. I don't know if we've had a full cohort finish all 6 years yet, but we have had some kids graduate from those programs. Gina, do you know anything else about the P-TECH programs in PPSD?
No, that's just about it.
Okay, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Now this one might be another one for you, Spencer, but are Rhode Island schools incentivized by the state education department policies to offer these programs? For example, if they offer concurrent enrollment, does it impact how their school is assessed?
Yeah, so it's measured through our Diploma Plus measure on the school report cards I mentioned earlier. So basically the way that works, this is under our ESSA accountability framework that every school gets a grade from the state, and we do star rankings. So 1 to 5 stars for every school. They get a score based on the percentage of students that have earned either college credit or industry recognized credential. That must come from our list from CT programs. And I think the question asks, how do you weight those differently? We actually treat them all equally currently in the framework. So you get 1 point for a kid with a CT credential, 1 point for a kid with a college credit. We give little bonus points if they have multiple versions of those.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Spencer. So, Gina, there was actually a follow-up question for you in the chat, which you may have seen, and Genevieve was asking, so many counselors are pro AP and believe that dual enrollment and AP cannot reside in the same space. AP is encouraged more than dual enrollment. And how would you suggest we work to change the mindset around dual enrollment courses among this group?
Yeah, I would share the data, right? Show the successes, and also the experience, hearing from other students and their experience with the dual enrollment courses. I know once students have completed, they think differently about it, and then, you know, they have a better feeling for the program, and also sharing that with students. Oftentimes, students will want to take a part-time program, right? They don't want to, they enjoy their senior year at their high school, so they may not be the person to be in that full-time dual enrollment program, but also just exploring one or two courses throughout their junior, senior year is beneficial. But counselors, I think, I know in Providence are beginning to think differently about that, because we do have more students participating and engaged with these programs.
That's really helpful. And speaking of just sharing the data, so our study showed that all participation in any of these programs or any of the programs is very effective. But Catherine, do you want to just mention, I know that you're really familiar with the research base here, like there's a lot of research out there that could be shared with counselors and helping them encourage students to participate. So do you want to just speak to that? There's a plethora of data out there.
Sure. I mean, there's a number of really strong studies out there. There's been several around the model that I think Spencer mentioned, that's called early college. So where you have sort of a more comprehensive set of services around really encouraging students to not only take a set of these kinds of college credit courses, but also that's within a wraparound of helping them complete a credential while they're in high school, a post-secondary credential or an industry credential. And so there's some really well done experimental studies on that model that have found some really positive results. There's also some links in the chat right now to some other research on different forms of both dual enrollment that happens at the college and also concurrent enrollment models, showing how those relate to positive student impacts on their their road to finishing high school and completing college. And so there's kind of it would be really great to see more out there as well about the sort of issues around access. So there's also a link there in the chat to a regional educational laboratory study from another region where they looked at sort of those participation rates in some of the central US states. So I think it's really important to focus on that as well and understand how these programs work for different students.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I'm glad that you plugged those other REL resources that are out there. So if you haven't, folks on the line, already clicked on those to save them, please do. I think that will close out our question and answer period. I'm so glad that we got a lot of questions in the chat. So thank you for asking those, everybody. And it looks like, Renee, you're just adding that probably another community college has done some interesting analyses of geographic distribution of AP, dual enrollment. That's great. Yeah, feel free to share that in the chat if you have it, Renee. Okay, so we can now start our final wrap up. I'll just like to thank the participants for joining today, thanking our panelists, Spencer and Gina, as well as Catherine for sharing the findings. This is the link here to download our study. It includes a full report, which is a 15-page report plus the technical appendices. It includes a very brief snapshot and then the link to all of our appendices. We've also included in the chat a link to our infographic, as well as a really great new video that I would love for you to take a look at and share that with your groups. Okay, next. These are some additional resources that Catherine had mentioned on dual and concurrent enrollment. Okay, next. And lastly, we would just love to get your feedback on the webinar today. It's really essential to our work. We use this to report back to our funder, the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences, and we use it to improve our programs. So please take the survey. And if you have any questions for the presenters today, you can contact myself or Catherine. Spencer, you're welcome. If you want to put your email into the chat, you're welcome to share that too. And we're happy to have you reach out to us. I think we have references here for anyone looking for a little bit more research. Thank you all for joining.